The plumber thought he knew his wife until her 50-year secret came out. Frank Miller had fixed pipes in downtown Chicago for most of his life. At 68, his hands were rough, his knees ached, and his back reminded him daily of every crawl space he had ever squeezed into. But Frank believed his life was honest, steady, and predictable. He had a small apartment near the L train, a reliable pickup truck, good health insurance through his union, and a modest retirement plan he checked once a year. And then there was Evelyn. For 50 years, she had been his calm. She handled the bills, reminded him of doctor appointments, and packed his lunch every morning like clockwork. Their evenings were quiet. News on low volume, shared takeout, conversations about grocery prices, real estate taxes, and how long their savings might last. It wasn't exciting, but it felt safe. That afternoon, Frank came home early from a plumbing job at a high-rise condo downtown. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, papers neatly stacked in front of her. Legal envelopes, financial documents, things Frank never liked touching. "You're home early," she said, smiling too carefully. Frank nodded. Pipe burst on Michigan Avenue, they postponed. She pushed the papers closer, her hand shaking just slightly. "Frank," she said softly, "we need to talk tonight." Something in her voice made his chest tighten. Dinner that night tasted wrong to Frank, even though Evelyn cooked his favorite, meatloaf with mashed potatoes. She barely touched her plate. She kept glancing at the clock, then at the folder on the counter, like it might explode if left alone too long. "Is this about money?" Frank finally asked, wiping his mouth. "If it's the medical bills, we'll figure it out. We always do." Evelyn forced a smile. "It's not that simple." That answer unsettled him. For 50 years, everything with Evelyn had been simple. They didn't fight much. They didn't hide things. Or so he believed. Later, they sat in the living room. Outside, the city hummed. Sirens in the distance, neighbors arguing somewhere down the block, a train rattling past. Life moving like it always had. Evelyn picked up the folder but didn't open it. Her fingers trembled. "Frank," she said, her voice low, "before I say anything, I need you to promise you'll let me finish." He frowned. "You're scaring me." "I know." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "I've carried this for a very long time." Frank leaned back, heart pounding. In that moment, he realized something frightening. Whatever Evelyn was about to say, it wasn't small. While Evelyn gathered the courage to speak, Frank's mind drifted backward, searching their past for warning signs he might have missed. He thought about their first apartment in Brooklyn, back when he was an apprentice plumber and she worked the front desk at a dental office. They were young, broke, and hopeful. They married fast, no big wedding, just City Hall, 2 witnesses, and a cheap dinner afterward. Evelyn said she didn't need a fancy dress. She said love was enough. Frank had believed her. Over the years, she became the organizer of their life. She handled credit cards, savings accounts, tax papers, and anything involving banks. Frank trusted her completely. After all, he trusted his own hands to fix leaking pipes. Why wouldn't he trust his wife with paperwork? He remembered how Evelyn insisted they move to Chicago in the early 90s, said New York felt crowded, said a fresh start would be good for them. Frank hadn't questioned it. Work was steady in Chicago. Life went on. "Frank," Evelyn said suddenly, pulling him back to the present. Her voice sounded older than usual, tired. "There are things about our past, things about me, that you don't know." Frank swallowed hard. After 50 years, he wondered how that was even possible. Evelyn finally opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, legal documents, and letters dated decades back. Frank recognized none of the institutions. The balances were large, larger than anything they had ever owned. "What is all this?" he asked quietly. Evelyn took a deep breath. "Frank, do you remember when I used to visit my aunt in New York every few years?" He nodded. "You said she was sick." "She was, but she wasn't my aunt." Frank leaned forward, confused. Evelyn explained that before they married, she had come from a very different life, a family with money, old money, real estate, private investments, financial advisors. When she met Frank, she was already running from it. She didn't want that world, she said. "I wanted a normal life. I wanted you." Frank felt something shift inside him. Not anger yet, just disbelief. "So you lied?" he asked. "I hid," she corrected softly. Frank stared at the papers again. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a small secret, it was a second life. Evelyn told him about her father, a powerful man in New York real estate who measured love in control. He planned her future before she was 20, marriage contracts, board seats, public appearances. She felt trapped. When she met you, you talked about fixing pipes like it mattered. You were proud of honest work. No one had ever spoken like that around me. She left everything behind, changed her last name, closed accounts she could, but some trusts were impossible to dissolve. They followed her quietly, growing in the background. "I never touched them," she said. "I let them sit." Frank stood and paced the room. "So all these years we struggled for nothing?" "No," Evelyn said firmly. "We built a real life, a life I chose." Her voice broke. "I didn't tell you because I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd think our life was a lie." Frank stopped pacing. The room felt smaller than it ever had. Frank didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window watching the city lights, replaying 50 years through a new lens. Every time Evelyn clipped coupons, every time she insisted on secondhand furniture, every conversation about making do. "You let me feel like I failed sometimes," he said quietly when morning came. Evelyn nodded, tears finally falling. "That's the part I regret most." She explained why she was telling him now. Her health wasn't what it used to be, and the trusts had conditions that required Frank to know, to decide. "I don't want to leave this world still hiding from you," she said. Frank felt torn between betrayal and something else, respect. She had lived exactly how she wanted, even if it meant carrying a burden alone. "I don't know how to feel," he admitted. "That's okay," Evelyn said. "I've had 50 years to process this. You deserve time too." Over the next few days, lawyers came, financial advisors, people in expensive suits who spoke carefully around Frank, as if unsure how to treat a plumber in a modest apartment. Frank watched, listened, asked questions. He learned the truth slowly. The money wasn't just wealth, it was responsibility. Properties, scholarships, foundations. His wife had been quietly funding programs for trade schools, community housing, and medical aid under different names. "You've been giving all this away?" he asked one evening. Evelyn smiled. "I learned generosity from you." That surprised him. For the first time, Frank saw that her secrecy wasn't greed or shame, it was choice, control over her own life. Still, the hurt lingered. Trust once shaken didn't snap back overnight. "I wish you'd trusted me enough to tell me," he said. "I do now," she replied. One afternoon, Frank drove past a plumbing site downtown. Young men worked under the sun, laughing, cursing, sweating. It hit him then. He didn't resent his life. He was proud of it. That night, he sat across from Evelyn and asked, "If I'd known back then, would you have stayed?" She didn't answer immediately. "Yes," she said finally, "but I don't know if you would have." Frank realized she might be right. He had fallen in love with a woman who needed nothing from him but honesty. Money would have changed the balance. He reached for her hand. "You scared the hell out of me." "I know," she said softly, "but you didn't cheapen our life. You protected it." The lawyers waited for a decision. They wanted to know how Frank felt about stepping into a world he had never asked for. Frank surprised everyone, including himself. "We keep living like we always have, but we do more good." They set up programs for trade workers, aging laborers, and medical support for retirees. Quiet giving, no names on buildings. Frank still fixed pipes, less often now, but he liked staying grounded. Evelyn watched him with admiration. You could have walked away. So could you. They had lost some years to silence, but they weren't losing the future. Months later, Frank stood at a community center opening funded by their trust. A young man thanked him, calling him sir, eyes full of respect. Frank realized then the greatest shock wasn't the money, it was understanding that the woman he married hadn't deceived him. She had chosen him every single day for 50 years, not for comfort, not for status, but for love. Evelyn squeezed his hand. "I should have told you sooner," she said. Frank smiled gently. "Maybe, but we made it here anyway." And for the first time in 50 years, they walked forward with nothing left unsaid.